Okay, says we're being live streamed. People who are watching recording, hang out for a minute while we do a little housekeeping. I got to post the link in the Telegram channel once it's available. Okay, there we go. And as always, guys, help me keep an eye on comments in the YouTube window. I won't be paying attention to it. YouTube live. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to the Pacific Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee. Today is Wednesday, August 3rd, 9 a.m. PST time. I am Chris Troutner, and I helped found the PSF, and these lovely folks here contribute to it. Let's go around and do a quick round of introductions. Go ahead and kick us off there, Aaron Shoemaker.
My name's Aaron Shoemaker, and I deal with XR development, cryptocurrencies, IPFS, all that good stuff, and utilizing PSF software to do so.
Nice. Go ahead, Aaron Sunman.
Hey, Aaron Sunman. I'm one of the other Aarons in the PSF. I've been a big fan of the Permissionless Software Foundation because just the ethos idea of permissionless innovation around the world, allowing anyone to jump in and use software that's free and composable. And I'm personally using it to take the idea of NFTs on SLP, on BCH, and hopefully on eCash as well, and working on those. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
Go ahead, Stoyan.
My name is Stoyan Zhekov, and I help with the maintenance of the JavaScript libraries for the PSF.
Yeah, and giving me excellent feedback on the code as I write it. And it's very appreciated. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and open up the agenda. So as always, our agendas are on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation GitHub group in a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee, and they're filed as issues. And so they're dated. As always, the scope of the meeting is to discuss PSF core software, and more info on that can be found at cachestack.info. So here's the agenda. So as always, I'll just start going into this, and this is intended to be a conversation. So please interrupt me, and we'll just go from there. One thing that I forgot to put on the agenda that I know you guys are all aware of it, but other people should be aware is there is a weekly or bi-weekly Bitcoin Cash hangout on Twitter Spaces hosted by a guy who called himself Fiendish Crypto. And so I managed to, or they had me on as a guest this last week at the last meeting, and this asked some really great questions about fullstack.cash, and they're doing a great job bringing in businesses, onboarding merchants, and bringing in businesses of all kinds. And so I reached out to them just to let them know, like, hey, as you are onboarding merchants and talking and bringing businesses into the Bitcoin Cash space, I'm sure you occasionally have the conversation of like building a custom app. And I was like, that's what fullstack.cash can do. So that was sort of how it got kicked off. But that Fiendish Crypto host guy, he just asked like the best questions, asked me probably the best 3 questions that I couldn't even come up with. And so it was great. So I'm going to take the MP3 of that and put it on the fullstack.cash website. And so I'm pretty excited about that. That was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I jumped in for quite a bit of it and really enjoyed just the interaction. And I think that one was on the Bitcoin Cash Independence Day, right? I think it was August 1st that one was on. I
hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, because in 2017, BCH split from BTC on that date. And that was, so anyway, I thought it was very enjoyable. And I think I'll be listening to those more often as it goes. So I'm glad you were there as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed them. I'm looking forward to future ones. Okay, diving into the agenda, lot of movement on the decks. That's been a huge focus of mine lately, trying to wrap up the grant from Ava Labs as well as the grant from the eCash GNC. So I've been in the process of forking a lot of the code that we have on BCH onto those other two chains. So there were some breaking changes in the Avalanche full nodes that broke minimal AVX wallet, which is a fork of our minimal SLP wallet. And so those got fixed. So that library is now working. And then I forked it and created minimal eCash wallet. So what's nice about these libraries is it abstracts all the specific details of the blockchain. You have the same function calls to create a wallet, to send coins, to send tokens. From a programmer standpoint, it doesn't matter what blockchain you're on. The calls are the same. The principles are the same. And then this library handles all the blockchain specific things. So very foundational building block. In fact, one thing I want to point out here is I changed the pinning of some of our repositories. So I've got BCH.js and BCH.js examples, BCH API, those haven't changed. But I'm starting to put more of a spotlight. I'm also going to update the fullstack.cash website to do more of a spotlight on these JavaScript libraries because they're so powerful and they let developers just really hit the ground running. Yeah, so that's a good foundation for all the dexes. I forked PSF BCH wallet, which is our command line wallet, and created PSF eCash wallet. So again, this is all the commands are the same. This is working on a command line. So if you can, anything you can do in PSF BCH wallet, you can now do on the eCash chain. And the commands are the same.
Chris, I have a question for when you fork these wallets in the BCH, in this SLP one, it's sending always a small amount of PCF to the PCF address on every transaction. What happens on this AVAX and eCash?
On eCash, it's the same. The same donation is going to the same address because the same private key works on that chain as well. And then on Avalanche, I don't think there is a donation because I just don't have a donation set up for that. So that'll probably be changed in the future. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I actually have to think about that. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it was just never put into the minimal AVX wallet because that was written from scratch. That's not really a fork. And Gary did most of that writing. That's why I'm foggy on its status.
So Jerry had a question about would it be possible to just toggle the node endpoints like MetaMask does rather than forking for each chain? That's a good question.
That is a good question. And eCash used to be like that, but it's not anymore because they changed the prefix. Instead of the Bitcoin Cash prefix on an address, it's now eCash. And that's largely what bit me when I was going through these libraries is the node itself. Like when you're getting data, like transaction data from the node itself, it's not using legacy addresses. It's using these eCash addresses. So that presents like you got to do that sort of translation when you're moving between the different full nodes. So it's not as simple as just changing, the node, the URL that you're talking to. Yeah, but yeah, that is a good question. Okay, so BCH.js also got updated to add additional support for eCash. Again, it was mostly like the main differences between Bitcoin Cash and eCash at this point is the address prefix, which also and then also the denomination. They're using bits rather than satoshis, and the full node is still working in satoshis, but they're making a really big push in that whole eCash ecosystem to use this new denomination. It gets a little confusing. All right, and then for anybody who's been using the BCH DEX, I have an NFT for sale up there, and NFTs have to be handled differently. They have different codes and stuff to move them around, and so I constantly had this issue where like the token was up there and then I needed to move it somewhere and I couldn't just sweep it conveniently like you can with fungible tokens. So I added this sweep NFT script in there. So there's a link there if anybody wants to check it out. So if you have tokens or NFTs up on the DEX and you want to get them out of that wallet, because what happens is the DEX, when you put something up for sale, it moves the token to an address on the HD key ring so that it doesn't accident, so it can just stay there while it's up for sale and it doesn't accidentally get disturbed. Because if the UTXO is spent, then all the other DEX nodes will automatically remove that token from their inventory, because that's how they know it's not valid, is if the UTXO has been spent. And so I had a script that would go through all the addresses that the DEX has stored tokens on to sweep them all into the root address so that you can then move them off the exchange. But I didn't have that same functionality for an NFT, so this will help that. I'm iteratively moving towards being able to sell NFTs on the DEX easily.
With this code, will it be possible to save and restore the NFTs to the paper wallet? So can I store my NFTs on some paper wallet?
Well, that's a great, yeah, it's not quite as easy as, wallet.fullstack.cash has the sweep feature. It does not support NFTs yet. This script can do that. It can basically, you give it a private key, which is the paper wallet, and then you can tell it to move the NFT somewhere. But in terms of like a visual graphical user interface, it's not there yet, but yeah, getting close. What really needs to happen is there's a JavaScript library that handles all the sweeping, and I just need to update it to work with NFTs and group tokens. And so until I get the time to do that, because there's a big QA step involved there, this is sort of a intermediate solution.
Because if it's possible, we can be maybe the only chain that can preserve NFTs on paper wallet. It will be, I think, like big selling point. You can save your wallets and it will be your NFTs, and it will be pretty safe.
Yeah, you're right. You have a little thing, put it on there. That's a great point. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, that's been having that feature has been in my mind for a while, but I hadn't thought about other chains. Like, no one's ever heard of storing an NFT on a paper wallet on another chain like Ethereum.
They was not so used until now, but if you have a Bored Ape class NFT cost like for 100 ETH, it will be nice if you can preserve it safely.
Right.
That's a big deal for people right now, and to feel like, what, I also have, this is very much could be a on-demand, bearer instrument, right? An NFT that's a bearer instrument, it could be very interesting. I mean, I think all of this stuff isn't fully explored in terms of the idea of what ownership is going forward. So making something that can be a physical thing is a big deal.
Yeah, well, those old school, like the Cassius coins, and there's people who sell, really nice bills with the private keys under a tamper-proof sticker like that. I think that use case makes a lot more sense for storing an NFT, because then you could put it in a picture frame and put it up in your wall and be like, yeah, that's my NFT. That's where it is. It's actually physically and technically in that thing. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've talked to a few artists about doing that, of either doing a tamper-proof sticker type deal or an RFID tag, something, or a combination of the two. It's something to attach the physical object to its NFT representation. Right. Oh yeah, Jerry has a comment too. ETH-based tokens live on their respective smart contracts, so it's harder to get current status of each address. You can't just check to see if it's in there. You actually have to validate through the smart contract. That makes sense. That's right. Yeah, they don't really live in your wallet. Your wallet is just like a key to access it. It lives in the smart contract. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's dramatically more complicated. Dramatically more complicated. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just, so Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So you don't actually store that. That's the difference between address versus UTXOs. You're not actually storing it somewhere. It's in the smart contract. That's where it always lives. Yeah, you just either have access to it or you don't. Yeah. Okay. Well, so moving on from that's the DEX updates. Moving on to just general tech updates. Got quite a bit here. So this pinning service, I started playing with this when I was on vacation because after talking with Aaron, I was like, man, like the pay to write database really does a lot of the heavy lifting here, and to create like an alternative cluster type system for pinning IPFS content in a censorship resistant way, it really wouldn't require much effort on top of what already exists in terms of the pay to write database. So I created this pinning service repository here, and I'd love for people to play with it. I've got it compiled into a Docker container that runs both on the Raspberry Pi and on a PC. I've got 2 nodes stood up right now, and basically, if you want to pin some content right now, you can do it by running this command in PSF BCH wallet or command line wallet. This will it'll write this little piece of data to the pay to write database, and any instances of the pay to write database that are also running this pinning service will pick up on that, and they will pin the CID. And so I ran through some numbers. Unfortunately, I don't have them in front of me, but I think if we charge 1 penny per megabyte, which is pretty high, and the reason it's high is the redundancy. But basically, I did some back of the envelope math, and if we charge a penny per megabyte, then we would have the funding to offer 5 bounties for people to run this pinning service. And I think it was like $10 a month. Like you get paid $10. So it's like the cost of running a VPS with 100 gigabyte hard drive is like $8 a month. And so we could pay $10 a month, and that would ensure that we have 5 nodes on the network, and that are getting compensated for offering the service. And not only would it be an instance of the pay to write database, they'd be pinning these files, which is, the whole point is to keep it decentralized and censorship resistant. We don't need to know who they are or where they are. It also would get more circuit relays as part of the bounty. You can configure this to be a circuit relay in addition to being a pay to write database instance, in addition to being a file pinning service. So they would all run together. They'd all be part of the bounty, and that would really give us a very robust network. So I'm really liking the math here, like because 5 nodes is, it's not a lot, but it's enough, and it would pay for itself. It'd be completely sustainable.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in and be a part of that as well. So I'm glad to see this moving forward. I'd actually like to use it as well, like the ownware.art.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to like make sure we don't just have stored on a single web server or this content, but have it out on IPFS.
Yeah, exactly. Like I love Web3.storage is such a convenient way to get files onto Filecoin, but that doesn't mean they're accessible. That whole part that goes from Filecoin back to IPFS, I don't know how that's being paid for. I don't know how long into the future that service is going to exist.
Yeah, it's and then you don't know where the storage is actually at. If they're using AWS, AWS is notorious for just saying you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So doing stuff like this, this is part of the reason I was looking into IPFS clusters in the first place. We're slowly getting nodes distributed to kind of run some tests on a localized basis, because I really want to have that data of like, how does this stuff work in the real world on a local basis with 15 machines?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really fast there? But right now, what you're doing with this is a great step into just creating another alternative pinning service, because there's not a lot out there. There's not a lot that are easily accessible, and
there's no pinning services that I'm aware of where you can peek behind the curtain and be like, okay, well, how exactly is your infrastructure set up?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so many of them are free, quote unquote. But then, like, if you use Pinata, for instance, Pinata has a limit on API calls through their gateway. You have to call through their gateway, and then it has a limit on the API calls through that gateway, timeout limit. And then they make you pay like $10 a month if you want to remove that limit. Well, how's that much different than AWS, Oracle, Azure, Blue Ocean or DigitalOcean, except it's slower. Like you're literally taking away the advantage of IPFS in a way, and you don't know that they could be just pinning it all on one server. It could be in a server in my basement, pinned 3 times. And I just created virtual machines on that server. And so technically I pinned it 3 times, but it's the back end of how it works means it's still going to be slow because it's coming through one internet connection, going through one NAT out into the world.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that, because it made me think of something I almost forgot about, and that is proof of space and time. Filecoin has really invested a lot of money in this proof of space and time so that people can't spoof the pinning of files. They can't just be like, yeah, I have this file pinned, and then when you request it, they just go get it real quick and then serve it. So it looks like they have it, but they're not actually storing it. It's a pretty hard problem, and I don't know much about that proof. And so that's also a concern here, is if we had these bounties.
If you look so if you utilize IPFS cluster control, you can do an IPFS cluster control pins list. And in those selections there, you can see how many times it's pinned and where it's pinned into what machines it's pinned.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So we can actually look up the machines that have the file pinned and verify that way.
And verify that it's pinned.
Yeah, even if it's not foolproof, like that's a pretty good.
And I think there's a way even to see how long it's been pinned, on those machines. So it would be something like, I mean, if not, you could do institute randomized checking, or like, so you don't get somebody who's like, oh, it's the 5th of the month. I know they always check for the pins. Let me get this pinned again, But also, here's the other thing though too. If these nodes are running as are not the trusted peers, so that's a difference in the IPFS cluster, is when you make that JSON, you have trusted peers. So if you only have 1 or 2 trusted peers, they're the only ones that can create pinning. So if you're running an IPFS cluster service node, but you're not a trusted peer, or you're running doing the peer follow or the follow peer node, you have no control over pinning your data.
Interesting.
So you will pin what the IPFS cluster control says to pin, unless you take your node off the network. So it's actually removes that step of having to go, well, are they pinning it? Because there's only one way it could be pinned, and that's from the cluster control saying pin this file.
That's good, man. I'm glad that you have this knowledge about how the clusters.
Dude, I've read really so much into IPFS clusters documentation and their code, and how they work everything. It's a great thing. I really wish there was some sort of geolocation type of thing where you can be like, yeah, I want this pinned in Tokyo, okay, here's our IPFS nodes in Tokyo. Let's pin it 3 times there, or I'm doing a festival in Columbus, Ohio. I made a site or something just for that festival. I want to pin it 10 times in Columbus. That's it. And, but right now you're stuck. Either you randomly pin it, or you use a Web 2 solution where you go, all right, now I need to pay for a server, I need to pay for a CDN, then I need to pay, like, say that temporary site for the festival is immensely successful during that festival, but I didn't pay the amount to make that CDN work right, and it crashes. That's an issue. Whereas IPFS bypasses those issues. You pin it 10 times in Columbus, every person that's accessing that is now seeding it automatically because of the nature of IPFS. Are they pinning it? Probably not. That's okay. But this is where the idea of transitory data fields comes in. A field of data that exists in the moment while people are accessing it. And when people stop accessing it, it retracts or to the pin nodes. And if nobody, go ahead.
There's a comment. There's a comment right now on YouTube. Sahid said we have to get blocks and transactions on IPFS. So I think that's an interesting storing it not just in the blockchain but also on IPFS. Also, Bitcoin payments module is here. What up?
Yo, yeah, shout out Bitcoin payments modules. Yeah, on the matter of getting transactions and blocks on IPFS, there is one of the earlier grant projects from Filecoin. They have all the blockchains. They snapshot them and put them up on Filecoin. Accessing them is a little weird. They just did it. They didn't bother to go to the blockchain communities and be like, what's the best way to do this so that you can access the data and actually use this information. They just did it, and so I don't think anybody's actually using. I haven't heard of a single case of anybody actually using this data for anything useful.
They just wanted to protect that it's out there. Someone wanted to make sure it was existing so that in case there was an attack, you had a way to get it. I guess that whether or not.
Yeah, it was like a proof of concept. When they launched the Filecoin blockchain, they were coming up with every crazy idea they could think of to put more data on the Filecoin blockchain, and putting all the blocks of all the blockchains was one of them, and they did it. So yeah, a couple other interesting points that I remembered as you were talking, Aaron Shoemaker, is the way the pay-to-write database works is that the data is only guaranteed to be accessible for a year. It'll probably be longer than a year, but when the nodes, the pay-to-write database nodes, are synchronizing using the consensus rules, one of the consensus rule is this entry older than a year? And if it is, it ignores it. And so things naturally fall off the database after a year. And this means that, we don't have the problem the blockchains have of this ever increasing, data set that everybody has to sync from Genesis. We don't have that problem. The whole thing's designed for things to fall off naturally. And so the pinning service leverages that same feature. And right now, if you issue this command, and the file's under a megabyte, it'll just work. And so the same penny that you pay to write to the database is the same penny to pin the content. And because the pay-to-write database entries naturally fall off after a year, these pinned files naturally fall off after a year. Yeah. And so it's just kind of a neat thing. And then that penny, that fee, will be controlled by the minting council. This will be a thing that we do when I think every 3 months it'll be every 3 months or whenever we need it kind of a thing is when the minting council will come together. And one of the things that they'll do every 3 months is update this price of what is how many PSF tokens makes up 1 penny in US dollars. And so that'll get updated by the minting council every 3 months at least.
Right on.
Yeah, so that's pretty fun. That was a surprisingly easy project. That's why I ended up doing it on my vacation, because I was like, oh, this is really one extra little addition to what already exists. And then, we have a pinning service. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes.
One thing we'll have to say is Chris is so effective on vacation that we want him to go on vacation more often. Not just kidding. He gets so much done. It's kind of amazing.
Okay, so we got some new commands added to the PSF BCH wallet, and we have Aaron Sunman to thank for this. He paid for these two commands because he's using it on his site, ownrare.art. So token info, you can give it the token ID of a token, and it'll go out and get the genesis data, the mutable data, and the immutable data for that token. And so that's just a handy, especially with NFTs. Like these two commands are much more handy for NFTs. And then the token transaction history, that gives you the transaction history of the token. And most people are familiar with the transaction history of a Bitcoin Cash address. Like if you look in your wallet, you'll probably have your transaction history. But this is not the transaction history of a specific address. This is the transaction history of the token. So it shows, so for fungible tokens, it's pretty chaotic because it shows every transaction that's ever involved that token. Which is useful information because it can be data mined for all sorts of things, like finding out what addresses hold what quantities of tokens at a specific block height. Like that's the raw information you need to answer that kind of a question. But in the case of an NFT, it's really helpful because you can see where the NFT has moved around because you're not tracking multiple tokens. So that's pretty neat, man.
These have been great also. One of the big things was just like what Stoyan was talking about before this was once you get an NFT, you need to validate that it's in this right group. So the token-info one, I can easily get the group ID so I can collect them together and make it feel like it's a cohesive item if you want to, right? There's lots that goes along, but until you have this data, it's much more difficult to feel confident that what you have is a collection put out by a single individual. So these have been great tools. So thanks for working on that, Chris, and getting those accomplished.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot about that. In the case of NFTs and group tokens, that token info, if it's a group token, it'll give you a list of all the children NFTs that were generated from it. And if it's an NFT, it'll tell you the group token that it came from. And then the last command is this token MDATX. And I saw Stoyan and Aaron Shoemaker playing with this in their Roots Up video. So this is when you're trying to attach mutable data, changeable data to a token. This is a step that you have to do before you create the token, is you have to generate a transaction ID, which is the thing that initializes the address that controls the mutable data so that you can update the data after the token is created. And so it's sort of an abstract step. And that's why it kind of took me a while to realize, like, this is probably should be its own command. So this is a really easy way to generate that transaction ID before you create a token so that you can attach mutable data to it.
Chris, we have a request with Alan for some of these commands. I think the last one, is it possible to add, I think now you're specifying this MDA address, like BCH address, but can it be specified also like a name in the wallet? Like
a Bitcoin Cash address or like
it's now, for example, I forgot which command. I think this last one, you have like a -a parameter. You just put there like a BCH address. But can it be, for example, -n and to put there just the wallet name? And it will get the address from the JSON file.
Yeah, let's look at that real quick.
I think when we was doing this with Aaron, we was talking, okay, maybe if we have this, it will be even easier.
What's that command? Token MDATX. Not really good. Oh, there we go. So you give it an MDA address and a wallet name to. Oh, okay. So give it a wallet name. That's an interesting idea rather than an address.
Because it will be inside the JSON file in the .wallets. So
Yeah, and I actually that could be changed without actually changing the user experience. You could just give it a name instead of an address, and then the code could automatically figure out.
Yeah, yeah.
Are they talking about a wallet that exists, or are they talking about a Bitcoin Cash address, or something that's not valid? Yeah. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, because then you could specify a wallet, and that's its whole purpose for existence is just to control the mutable data.
Yeah, because usually when we're experimenting, I'm not sure what the other people will do, but we just generated the two wallets. One was for the funding, and one was for the controlling the mutable data.
Right.
And he was thinking, okay, can we just like put the name of this MDA wallet there, and it can go like this one.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, because that is the intended workflow, and in this case, the wallet is the address, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, for convenience, it'd be easy to just name a wallet instead of copying and pasting an address from the wallet.
Is there a way to send the transaction to update the token from the PSF BCH wallet right now?
I don't think so.
No, and that's this is kind of why we needed this pinning service.
Yeah,
is because the first step in doing that is to upload data to Filecoin or get it up on IPFS, and then when you generate the Bitcoin Cash transaction to update that, you're pointing to that CID on IPFS. So yeah, this is kind of this is what got the gears turning with the pinning services. It's like we need a more something that's more native to us, to our organization, that's not dependent on some third party for pinning. I mean, right now we've got Filecoin, and I had seriously thought about writing a command that would just let you upload data to web3.storage, and I may still do that, but we really, and actually we already have, that's the thing, we already have the command now. Like you don't even need to run the pinning service to pin content to our pinning service. You can run that command I showed earlier and then that'll give the CID. So with that, now I can create a command that just update the mutable data, and here's the CID that I want to update it to.
Because then we can create a token and make it mutable, and then update it all from the same wallet.
Yeah, and that's the goal. I mean, this command line wallet is our wallet. It should be able to do everything that we think is cool.
And then Aaron, with your NFT site, you can just put a reference like, you want to make an NFT? Go to the PSF BCH wallet. This is the easiest way to do it. Yeah,
or build a web UI that just wraps it so that people can just interact with it.
Yeah, which is what I'm doing right now. In fact, that part's already done. But I haven't messed with the mutable side. I think that there's a lot of value that has not come about, the ability to take something and make a change to it. So that's stuff that I have to watch your Roots Up episode to learn more about how you've used it in the past, because I think that's not been explored nearly to what extent it needs to be, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, it was a good episode. It was short and sweet and to the point. I really enjoyed it.
That was the mutable data one, and I think the last one was Multi-Sig.
Yeah, and that it's so helpful for me to watch those, to get the feedback, because I'm not involved. That's the magic thing, is like, I'm not there to tell you guys what to do. You have to figure it out for yourself, and that's why it's so informative for me to watch you guys struggle a little bit, because then it really highlights like, oh yeah, okay, I made some bad assumptions there, that people would just know what to do here.
Well, sometimes, like what you were saying before, Chris, maybe a couple episodes ago, where you talk about, it'd be nice if someone wrote out exactly what you need to do to create brand new things, but they don't exist. So you have to start from scratch. You have to figure everything out. So it is fun.
Yeah.
Then Stoyan did that. He's got step 1, do this.
Yeah.
Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this.
Yeah, that's good
and
stuff.
He just runs step 1.
So the next thing I want to show you guys, I'm really excited about. I've spent like the last 5 days. I told everybody to leave me alone, and I didn't really leave the house, and I just like went nuts on this app. Because Daniel I worked with Daniel to create wallet.fullstack.cash, and it's a really nice web wallet. But especially as we introduce the mutable data, it's really slow and clunky. And so Daniel's working for somebody else now, and so I felt it was time for me to step up my React skills and my front end skills, and so I thought the best way to do that would be to rewrite the web wallet and port it over to a new app, because there was just a lot of stuff going on that I didn't understand, and also we started this with Gatsby. We started wallet.fullstack.cache with Gatsby, which is a great framework. And at the time, it was the best option, but React has come a long way since then. And we've also learned things that we didn't know, like the capacitor framework, which lets you compile a React app into a native Android and iOS app. So I started this like with that whole workflow of like the end target is not a web app, but an Android app. Like we're putting more emphasis on the web app side because that's our universal thing that we don't have to worry about the platform that the user is on. But one of the things that I care deeply about is these emerging markets like South America and India, and pretty much they only use Android. Like nobody in those countries have iPhones. They're just prohibitively expensive, and so everybody's on Android. So that's another reason. And I don't have an iPhone, so that's another reason why I'm focused on Android. But anyway, so the web wallet's very simple. It's got this menu. It's just 3 screens, tokens, BCH, and wallet. So it comes up and it shows the tokens. You can click the refresh button to refresh your balance. But you can see here, all these tokens have icons. So these first 2 are using our specification for mutable data. And then the tether is the Cosina's GitHub repository for token icons. It's sort of the conventional way of uploading token icons. So it already works with both of those. So if you have like a Spice token, its icon's going to automatically show up here. The wallet screen is, so everything's works exactly the same as wallet.fullstack.cache. So anybody using that, everything's going to be the same. The main difference is that this is a lot faster, and it makes way fewer API calls. And you can run it as a native app if you have an Android. So all the important information, you can delete your wallet, you can import a 12-word mnemonic here to replace the existing wallet, and it just automatically creates a wallet when you open it. So it'll just assign you a wallet by default and you're off and going. And if you don't like that one, you just import the one you want or delete it to create a new one. And it works off those 12 keys. And then on the Bitcoin Cash side, it's very much similar to the tokens, where you can hit refresh to refresh your balances, listed in the US dollar equivalent, Bitcoin Cash, and then Satoshis. And then just a simple send. Same thing here, where you can use this toggle to switch back and forth between your Bitcoin Cash and SLP address. So you can click the QR code to copy the address to the clipboard. And this is built using our Web3 tech. That's a big difference. Is wallet.fullstack.cache uses the cloud infrastructure at fullstack.cache, but this uses our IPFS Web3 infrastructure. So if this thing comes up and if it has a network issue, it'll tell you right off the get-go, like, there's a problem. And then it'll bring you to this screen and it'll say, select an alternative server. And so as our network grows, as we incentivize people like with the pinning service, and we get more back-end services up there on the network with more circuit relays connecting everything, this list will grow. And so that's what I love about this, is that there's no fullstack.cache, there's no whatever.com, like anybody can provide this back-end service, and this wallet will just work. And now that we have this foundation, like this is going to be from here, I'll fork this to create the user interface for the Avalanche DEX and the eCash DEX. And and just in a lot of apps, like the pinning service, being able to just upload a file and pin it to IPFS, that'll be another screen. I'll fork this and add another view. So all these things that we can do in the command line wallet, I can now start building user interfaces for it. And it'll compile to an Android app. So it'll have a very fast native feel to it.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Chris,
And
in this select list, is there a way to add your own custom server?
Not yet, but there will be.
Because people, they will want to check how to see, to test if their nodes, local nodes work maybe. So this will be a nice debug tool if you can add your own your own server.
Yeah. So this list of servers is coming from this gist on GitHub right here. So I can update this. So if anybody sets up a server, they can just send me this information, and I can update this, and it'll magically appear on the list on everybody's phone and app. They don't need to update anything. And then of course, this is depending on GitHub, so that's a potential issue down the road. But there's ways to get around that too. We can. There's going to be multiple ways that the list will be populated. Like these will probably be hard coded. And then it'll go out and get the list from GitHub, and whether that succeeds or fails, it'll probably have a third method eventually where it goes out and gets like mutable data from a token that's updated by the minting council. Although at that point, you're kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? You got to find a server to get the data from the blockchain so that you can find a server.
Yeah, it will be nice if there's a screen from where you can ping these addresses and see which one is the faster one.
Or just have a user interface here where you can manually add your own. Wallet.fullstack.cache has that, where you can manually tell it what server to connect to. So I'm definitely going to add that UI here, but it was a lot of work just getting it to where it is now. Just because there's, I'll show you some of the animation here, like that. And then when you go to send, so as you type USD, it converts it to Bitcoin Cash, or you can swap it and type in Bitcoin Cash and it'll convert it to USD. But if I just send 10 cents to myself, there we go. So it's got this modal that comes up in a dialogue, tells you what's happening, and then a little spinner thing, and then a link to a block explorer when it's all done. And the same thing and then it updates your wallet balance when you close that modal. So just getting the animations and the workflow is so much work. But now that this is here, adding new stuff is pretty easy because you can just look and see how the old stuff was built.
Also, it will be nice if you can make this more, so the people can use just one component from this, like showing balance. Mm-hmm. This to be like a balance component. So if you have, for example, donation site, you just can put there your balance component, and it will show the balance. You don't need send in there, but you need receive and show balance. So if you just can make it more component-like, it will be very useful for JavaScript developers to get this React component and use it directly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because I wasn't going to go this deep into the weeds, but that was exactly, going back and looking at wallet.fullstack.cache and the way it's written in Gatsby, like we kind of tried to make it like a really clear connection of the components so that you could get component reuse. And so that was a big consideration as I wrote this. So like, for instance, the BC, the whole, like the wallet is the view is in this directory. Everything that makes that up's in here, and everything's broken down, like the copy on click, when you click the little copy icon, that's a component. The delete button to clear the wallet, it's just a button, but it does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and so that's its own component. And so a lot of this code was written with the intent of breaking it up and making it very React component reusability. So like let me see,
maybe you can make these components a different repository, and you can export it like NPM, for example. So the peoples in their projects will just do import BCH components, and they can start using them.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I mean, it's a lot of work, so I wouldn't want to
Yeah,
do
it's
it
a
unless I knew
little
people were going to use it that way.
pain, but it will be great for this project too, because the people can contribute to the components part, like JavaScript
Mhm.
developers. They don't need to touch the wallet itself.
Yeah. Well, my intent really was for me and for other people to, rather than taking components from this and putting in some new app, would be forking this and then building on top of this
Yeah.
basic functionality. But yeah, like this balance, this little card that displays the balance, like that's its own component. So that'll get reused when I fork this and start doing the Avalanche side of things. Like I'm still going to need to display a balance. So visually, nothing's going to change. Just like the units are going to change. And so I'll be able to reuse, that entire component basically.
Nice. Looks good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where that goes because we've got a lot of great tech, but nobody knows it because there's no button they can push. And that's been the big thing is like I've tried to focus on everything except for the front end stuff, because I had Daniel. And so now I'm just sort of owning that final little piece. And I'm excited to start taking all these back-end features, the pay-to-write database and the DEX, and start making like really good, easy, simple user interfaces for them. All right, the last thing I want to cover is the multi-sig test repository that Aaron and Stoyan covered in their Roots Up video. But these are just this was mostly for me. And that's why they're in my own personal repository. And I sort of numbered them. They're just code examples showing different ways of creating multi-sig wallets. And the main ones are these last two. And I'm really glad that you guys picked up on this in your Roots Up video. Is the round robin signing is like what I would call a series versus a parallel. So it's a series. So it's like I generate the transaction, I sign it, I pass it on to Stoyan. He signs it, and then he passes that on to Aaron, and he signs it and broadcasts the final transaction. That's a series. Whereas a parallel is I generate a transaction, I send it to everybody. Everybody adds just their signature and sends it back to me, and then I combine all the signatures into the final transaction and broadcast it. So I would call that like a parallel signing, or what's the term I use for the minting council? An aggregator. The person aggregates all the signatures, and that's probably how it'll be done for the minting council, where we can randomly select a member of the minting council, and they're the ones that actually generate the transaction, sends it out to everybody, collects all the signatures, and then broadcasts the final transaction.
Well, will be there like what will be like middleware, like off-chain way to send this partially signed transaction? Like when you sign your transaction, you like committed to like pay-to-write database, or from where the next person will get the transaction?
Yeah. So this will use the messaging that's built into the PSF BCH wallet. So you can already send an end-to-end encrypted message to any Bitcoin Cash address using the message send, and the message check will check for new messages, and the message read will de-encrypt and display the message. So we've already got this infrastructure, and that piggybacks on top of the pay-to-write database. So it's writing encrypted data to the pay-to-write database. So this is how the transaction will go out, and the signed transactions will come back in, and all the communication in the minting council will take place using these. Because we don't. The idea behind the minting council is that it's anonymous first, or anonymous friendly. So everybody will be identified by their Bitcoin Cash address, not their name. Or actually they'll be identified by the NFT that they hold. So they can change addresses, and we can still, the NFT acts as a homing beacon. And so whatever address is holding the NFT, that's what will receive the encrypted message, and have the ability to sign. there's some caveats there because the signature is based on the address, not the token. So if you move your NFT, then you still need to retain the key to that address so that you can sign it and then on the next multi-sig transaction you can update to a new address. So there'll be some details to work out there, but that's the gist. So yeah, that was just me playing around while I was on vacation. So the next step is to take these examples and integrate them into the PSF Multi-Sig minting app, which already exists, but uses this sort of weird way of doing multi-sig where it passes around private keys instead of signatures. And so that needs to be updated to use this new code that uses signatures instead of private keys. And then we can set up the minting council.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that's the agenda, guys. I'm happy to open it up to anything you guys want to talk about.
I'm going to mention one thing that during that BCH crypto, Phoenix Crypto's BCH Twitter space, it talked about one of the values that made Bitcoin exist and become something was Ross's Silk Road and making a space for people to buy things. So, I know it hasn't come up yet in this meeting, but this idea of having something that's protected, that's anonymous, that's central and the non-centralized and stuff is something you're already working on. And so I don't know. I think that was one of the things that you didn't come back and say, "Hey, I'm working on that."
Oh, yeah, I know. I just didn't want to open the can of worms at that time. But I'm glad you brought this up because that's something I forgot to share. And let me share that right now.
I was expecting you to go, "Hey, dudes," but I'm like, no,
I know.
I know. Half hour.
Plus, there were like technical audio issues going on, so that's the other reason why that held me back. But yeah, I could have. I know I was this close to like going off on that, but since you brought that up, I have started drafting a new specification called the Simple Store Protocol.
Oh,
so
nice.
Obviously, that's a name play off of the Simple Ledger Protocol, because it uses a lot of the same principles. So none of this is set in stone. This was really just an effort for me to get on paper some of these ideas that have been rattling through my head. But basically, and we talked about this in previous meetings, so this won't be new to either of you guys. So basically, a store is an NFT, and there's a schema. So there's JSON LD or JSON linked data, and then there's a site called schema.org. This goes back to the original roots of Web3. Tim Berners-Lee, who created the web, he back in the early 2000s envisioned the semantic web, which is what became called Web3 before Ethereum devs took over that name. And so the original Web3 had nothing to do with blockchain. It had everything to do with linked data and these data structures so that computers can figure out on the fly, this data is a product, this data is a store, this data is a review, to get context about the data. And so this specification leverages all that work that is just sitting there and hasn't really been utilized very much. So there's a schema for stores, there's a schema for products, there's schemas for reviews. So I linked to them here. And these are very flexible schemas. Like it's more of a recommendation than a specification. They're like, if you're gonna, use like a name or a price or like all these super common things, like here's how you should do it. And if you have a piece of information that's not listed here, just make it up as you go along. That's totally fine. But as long as everybody sort of uses the same syntax for a price, then then your app can interact with my app. So it's really leveraging those linked data specifications. But the idea is the store is a group token. Sorry, I said NFT earlier. The store is a group token. So stores can generate NFTs. So those could be receipts. They could be digital products that are sold in the store. But there's no requirement. It's just that the store is using this mutable data. It's what it is on the blockchain is a group token. And that means it can leverage mutable data and immutable data. and it can generate NFTs, but those NFTs are not specified in here. You can do whatever you want with those NFTs, and then the products are just data in the mutable data of the store token, and they're described using this product schema. And then claims, this is the new thing. Claims are not a token. Claims are they're about something. They're typically about a store or a product, or a claim can be about another claim. And so this is how you leave reviews, and this is how store owners can leave reviews about reviews. And these aren't, because they're not tokens, they're just transactions. They become permanent and immutable. And you get these, if you really want to get into the weeds, like philosophically, there's this concept of non-remediation or something, like basically, if you sign something, like basically it's really hard to say somebody else did it. So that's good stuff, but that's basically the gist of it. Everything else is like, so here's a very simple example of what JSON linked data looks like for a store. Like this would be like the minimum amount of data to comply with this specification. This is a store and it's using this schema. And that's about as far as I've gotten. But yeah, the claim is part of the op return. I submitted a pull request to the locad ID repository. Both I haven't done eCache yet because I just found out that it exists on eCache. But so what locad ID is, SLP tokens are based on the locad ID. Locad ID is it's a 4-byte prefix that you add at the beginning of an op return. And basically that lets the app go to this CSV file, which is the locad, and look up like, okay, because the op return used this prefix, I now have context and I know that this is like memo.cache, or it's an SLP token, or it's a claim. So it's a way for computer software to like very quickly understand, get context for the rest of the data that's to follow. And so this is a transaction ID, which is the group token for the store. And then this is the actual information that's in the claim is a JSON file on IPFS. And so that's how, say, a user would leave a review for a product sold by a store. And then the store owner could follow the same protocol to generate a claim. And instead of referencing their store, they would reference the transaction ID of the user's claim. And so the format would look almost exactly the same, but the context is different. But that's the basic idea. It's intended to be very simple, I think if it's it'll be really powerful.
Right.
We've got the basic idea of identity, stores, products, reviews.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was great. I'm just thinking about the use cases that people care about in the world for something that's decentralized. And this is one of those that is clearly out there.
Yeah. I mean, what I want to do is I regularly stock extra frozen pizza and ice cream because I'm on a remote island and those things are hard to get. I would love to just be like, I have 3 frozen pizzas for sale, and my friend down the road makes art. I'd love for her to like list, here's some of the art I had for sale. And my buddy up the road does dirt work. He's got an excavation company. I'd love for him to be like, $150 an hour. And just to be able to look on my phone on that app with a map, just like Craigslist, and be able to see all the things that are like geographically close to me, and to be able to send them an encrypted message and communicate. Maybe some escrow. If I want to hire the excavator guy, I can drop, $150 into escrow just so he knows that I'm serious. We can do all this with that app that I just showed. So that's where I want to take this.
Great.
I mean, perfect timing with the inflation and impending economic collapse.
Yeah.
People are going to need other stuff to trade with.
Yeah, well, the thing is we've got to make the government not matter. Like, that's the only way we can take our control back is just to make them irrelevant. And so being able to trade with your neighbors is a great way to make government irrelevant.
That sounds
without the
dangerous.
coincidence of wants, right? The coincidence of want problem has always been the issue. How do you actually find who has what that you want to trade with, right? That's always been extremely difficult. Now you got Craigslist, but once that goes away, then you've got to do something like this. So I'm rereading that Sovereign Individual. If not, someone hasn't read that book, that is an amazing book that outlines, written 25 years ago, as to where we are right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to read through it right now for the first time, and it's just so grandiose. The claims are, I mean, back then in the early 90s when it was written, it was such a grandiose claim.
Absolutely.
And not everything came true. So you kind of have to cherry pick with the history. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it's more inspirational than factual. And so it's just, I'm reading it for the first time. And I definitely, like, I was expecting more out of it, but it was prescient. I mean, at the time, if you read that thing and it excited you in the 90s, like a lot of the stuff he talked about is in the process of coming true.
Right.
I'll have to check that out. And another one to read is the Agorist Primer by Sir Edwin Compton III.
What was the name of the first one? Sovereign
Individual.
Sovereign Individual. Okay.
Yeah, and it's available on lots of other platforms. But I think it's well worth. But like you said, Chris, it was written in the 90s, and at that point in time, all of this hadn't been built yet, so it was very grandiose. And now a lot of it has come true, but it also just puts together this idea that big changes like this happen over thousands of years. We live in only 100-year span of it, so seeing this happen is we're only going to be able to see this tiny piece of it because our lifespan is only that, but it started back then, and the change is going to be happening over the next 150, 200, 500 years, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to, if you look at history, or your place in history is like, yeah, that's a nice way to bound it.
I always tell people that if you look at the Enlightenment period, people said, how could we possibly ever live without kings? And that was an evolution in mindset and governance to what we have today. And we're now at a point where people are like, how could we possibly ever live with what we have today, without what we have today? And we're in a similar mindset shift and evolution. And that is a natural progress. And I try to get people to realize it in that context. If you were in the 1700s, you would be saying the same things, and people are sitting there going, we don't have kings running everything. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be madness, and it's the same thing we have now.
That book title you mentioned, Aaron, was it Agorist Primer? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to look that up. I've never heard of that before.
It's really short, and it talks about going from, he actually works backwards from a stateless society to a statist society. But he talks about all the methods in between, and how things would naturally break down, and how private security would eventually be hired. And, because there's more economic prosperity in the agorist community, people would eventually start moving over there, So
interesting. Yeah, I'm going to read that. Real quick, Jerry in the chat said, does anyone know what the Smart BCH guys are doing in terms of a new bridge? I don't know. I'm mostly ignorant. That's my short answer. What I do know is that it's like a train wreck. So it's hard to look away from and mildly interesting, but ultimately I just want to, get to where I'm at and not pay attention to the train wreck. But from what I've seen, so there's still like the actual bridge is no more. There's big chunks of Bitcoin and Smart BCH that are sort of locked up, and nobody knows when or how they're going to get released. But what I have noticed that's really interesting is there's a small group. There is another centralized bridge from Binance to Smart BCH, and all the people, mostly non-Americans, like a lot of Asian people are like, what are you guys freaking out about? We've got the Binance bridge. Everything's fine. And because, Binance, why not? Like, I just find it hilarious that it's like, so I don't know if this is the direction it's going to go, but if it does, like, it's just going deeper into like centralized control where there's going to be like maybe 2 people validating the whole blockchain, and then you can bring your tokens in from Binance.
Ouch.
Jerry says there's other companies working on bridges right now. So
Good.
I mean, they're
Good,
locked
yeah.
up somewhere, right? I mean, you still have to, they have this, I don't know. I'm not going to pay that much attention.
Yeah, I have seen other groups talking. I think I can't remember who was working on the Shawgate thing, but there has been progress. I don't know if it has momentum or if anything will actually be, come from it. I'm hopeful. Like I don't want to completely shit on their parade. It's good stuff. It's just really sketchy. It went from pretty sketchy to really sketchy.
Right. I'm all for it working well, but right now I think it will work out and we will have a lot, but it'll probably take another 6 months to a year before I feel confident about it.
Yeah, but also since we're talking about EVM chains, I've been following the Avalanche subnets. So it's interesting. I've gotten together with a few other people who wanted to invest in crypto, and we managed to, when the price crashed, we managed to collectively put together 2,000 Avalanche so that we can set up our own validator. I don't know if I buy into the whole narrative that subnets are going to be like the next big thing. If they are, I'm positioned to profit from it, so that's good. I'm going to keep building on Bitcoin Cash because that's just my personal favorite, but it is an interesting idea, and they just launched an EVM subnet. So a subnet is basically a side chain. So you can launch your own EVM blockchain on top of Avalanche, and you can set your own transaction fees, and your network traffic will in no way be impacted by the base chain or other subnets.
They have to.
Avalanche keeps saying this is for video games. This is the thing that video games need. They need high bandwidth blockchains. And so that's apparently what they're, so I don't know if I buy into all of it, but that's the narrative. And there's definitely some there.
I could see the use case for video games, although I still think that what PSF is building on BCH will actually be better for it, because when you have subnets, things are locked up, and then gamers who already do not like microtransactions in the siloed systems, which is where it exists now, are going to say, how is this any different than the siloed systems we exist in with Activision and Blizzard and all these other places? You're just creating a subchain, and then they have to still do rollups at a regular basis in order to write to the main chain, and then then you're also trusting that centralized party that they're going to write your transaction correctly, or they, so
Cosmos have this from years. All the Cosmos, the subnets, they're already connected. They have this inter-blockchain in the lower level.
Right.
So it's not a news. I don't know. Avalanche guys, they're late for the party in general. I hope they will make it, but yeah.
Hey, I'm a big Cosmos fan. I agree. And I think Thorchain, ThorSwap, all that stuff is just an amazing thing. And I know I agree with you.
Yeah, I hear the argument for subnets. And I can see how the speed happens. My question is, how is it much different than, doing stuff on Web 2? Especially if, you're still going to be utilizing Amazon, which a lot of them are, or you're still going to be utilizing Azure, basically cloud computing, cloud storage. A lot of these companies, they utilize that anyways,
but for example, what the guys on Cosmos decide, one of their blockchains, Akash, they provide you with hardware also. So they have already decentralized infrastructure.
See, that's a better idea if you're
providing
providing hardware.
you can buy a small device, connect it to the internet, and you're part of the network. Or I think there was also like some like virtual machine or whatever. But yeah, everybody is now working for the decentralized like hardware, like infrastructure. How to see? Nobody don't trust in Amazon anymore.
Also, there's 4 server centers in the United States, 1 in Canada. There's, I think, 1 in Mexico. There's 1 for all of Africa. 1 for all of Africa. There's 1 in India, 1 in, I think, Singapore, 1 in Europe. And so you are putting your reliance in something that, like, if one of those server centers goes down, everything is gone for that period. And we've seen this happen where Amazon East went down and took down like 25% of the internet in America because they were all using Amazon East. You know, so this is an issue. I think, Chris, you brought this up, where it's like so much of this Web 3 stuff is built on Web 2 or is utilizing Web 2 stuff. And
or the to run the infrastructure, particularly for these EVM chains. Like Avalanche is the lightest weight EVM chain I have personal knowledge of. Like, and that before Avalanche, I just thought, like, there's no way you can run an EVM node on anything less than a cloud server. Like a home desktop server is not adequate. And that's a huge issue for me.
yeah.
And today you can just barely run an Avalanche node on a desktop. You have to have a really good internet connection, and you have to have a really fast hard drive. And so that's even sort of pulling away from that. And that's what I love about the Bitcoin is, you know, we can fork that code base anytime we need more bandwidth. Just create a side chain, just fork it and build a bridge. And you know, that's what we'll do if microtransactions on Bitcoin Cash are ever threatened. We'll just build our own side chain, and that way we can guarantee control over our own microtransaction transaction system, and we'll just build a bridge to bring tokens back and forth.
Yeah. You know, I'll see. We'll see what happens with this, because everybody's saying, "Oh, layer 2 is going to be it. Layer 2 is going to be it." But it's like you're going backwards almost, because you're like, okay, you're going to go to layer 2, and then you're going to trust that now this layer is going to accurately do a roll up, whether it's ZK rollups or the other one, and post that to the main chain accurately. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying there will be great companies that do this. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, to continue that thought, I really like what Emin Gunsirer, he's been saying. Avalanche is Bitcoin's layer 2. They have the core wallet, and you can take your BTC Bitcoin and you can load it in the core wallet and bring it over the bridge to Avalanche, and then use that Bitcoin on Avalanche as collateral for, say, a loan or whatever. But now all of a sudden your finality is down to a second. Your transaction fees are like a few cents. And but you're still using the original Bitcoin. And so, like, I really like this idea that, like, other blockchains are the layer 2 to the other blockchains. Like, that's not how they were envisioned. Someone wants to kill me for butchering the terminology, but but that's the reality.
Yeah, I like the Near guys approach. Their EVM, it's named Aurora, but the native token is ETH. So when you bridge it, like if you're an Avalanche, it will be rapid BTS, but you need to pay transaction in AVAX. But these guys, they bridge the ETH and you pay everything in ETH. So you does not lose your ETH. You just, it's layer 2 for the Ethereum blockchain. So if you want, it will be always the same price on both. So if you're like converted something and AVAX is down, this is up, down. No, it's same. ETH. Yeah. And you pay everything in ETH fees, but the fees are like, it's like less than a cent for a transaction. And it's like 1 second or 2 second validation. So it's like better eat than eat.
Yeah, yeah. And this is why I buy BTC and ETH because, well, not ETH is, I have a different reason for buying ETH, but the BTC community has really focused on this digital gold narrative, this pristine collateral narrative. It's just gold 2.0. And if that's all it ever is, and I know a lot of people are hoping that that's all it ever will be, that because there's all these ways to bring that BTC over to these other chains and actually use it, actually spend it. That is the layer two. Like, I don't think Lightning's ever gonna take off on a mass level. Like, it's just too complex. But being able to bridge your Bitcoin onto Avalanche and then actually use it fast and inexpensively, like they're there. I mean, that's real utility. It's available today.
Yeah. I used ETH like collateral on AVAX because they had like a great lending service. So you just put there your ETH, you get some USDT or something, you can trade AVAX or whatever you want. And when you finish, you return the loan, get your BTC back.
Yeah, that's going to be the next big bull run is more people figuring out that, like, I never have to sell my ETH or my Bitcoin. Like, why would you sell it? That's stupid. If you need money, just post it as collateral and get the money. And, like, never sell it. And as long as enough people believe that narrative, the price will always go up because there will always be less in circulation.
Yeah, and Thorchain is going to be allowing people to be able to take out stable coins based on anything at 0% interest in the next with using Rune. I mean, there's a lot more tools coming in the DeFi space to allow exactly what you're talking about without any central party risk, with no centralized risk.
Yeah, I love Thorchain. I wish the transaction fees were a little lower, and so my problem is, like, DAI is the stable coin I trust the most, but the transaction fees are outrageous on Ethereum. And so when I have, if I get paid in Bitcoin Cash, I need a cost-effective way to convert some of that into DAI. And it's getting better. Thorchain is great because I can convert I don't think Avalanche is on Thorchain. If it was, I could go Bitcoin Cash to Avalanche and then Avalanche to a DAI equivalent. And that would all be fast and pretty low cost. So yeah, I'm trying to, DAI is like the long-term stablecoin savings account. I need a short-term spending stablecoin account. Like, Tether could potentially be that on the SLP token on Bitcoin Cash. But yeah, finding something that's, you got to have your fast, cheap, transactional, stablecoin, and then you have your stablecoin that's like long-term stable. Doesn't necessarily need to have low risk. It doesn't need to have good transaction fees.
Right.
So but Thorchain's awesome. Okay, guys. Well, let's go ahead and wrap that up. I think this has been a really good meeting.
Sounds good. All right. And then Roots Up Friday, Storian.
Yes, don't forget this time.
I won't. All right.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we'll be online at the PSF Telegram channel.